A longtime leader of Mexico's Sinaloa drug cartel pleaded not guilty to drug and murder charges this morning in New York. Zambada didn't speak during his court hearing except giving yes or no answers to the judge.
The Sinaloa Cartel is one of the most powerful and feared drug organizations in Mexico, responsible for much of the drug trafficking across the world. Recently, however, a civil war has broken out within the cartel, dividing it into two main factions. The Mayos, led by Ismael el Mayo Zambada, and the Chapitos, led by the sons of infamous cartel leader Joaquín el Chapo Guzmán. This internal war has unleashed violence across the streets of Sinaloa, particularly in its capital, Culiacán, causing fear and chaos among its citizens. The Sinaloa Cartel was founded in the late 1980s and became one of the most dominant forces in the drug trade under the leadership of Joaquín el Chapo Guzmán and Ismael el Mayo Zambada. For years, El Chapo and El Mayo controlled the cartel together, smuggling drugs like cocaine, marijuana, heroin, and methamphetamine into the United States and other parts of the world. El Chapo was notorious for his adventurous prison escapes, his violent actions, and his massive drug empire. However, after his final arrest and extradition to the United States in 2017, the leadership structure of the Sinaloa Cartel began to shift. El Chapo's sons, known collectively as Los Chapitos, or the Chapisa, stepped into leadership roles, while El Mayo continued to run his own faction. This division led to increasing tensions between the two groups, setting the stage for the conflict we are witnessing today. When did all these start? The civil war within the Sinaloa Cartel erupted in September 2024, when gunmen loyal to El Mayo stormed a neighborhood in Culiacán controlled by the Chapitos. This attack marked the beginning of what has now become one of the most violent periods in the city's recent history. Both sides are using heavily armed private militias that look and operate like military forces. These factions are not only fighting for control of drug routes and territory, but also for dominance within the cartel. The violence has reached unprecedented levels. Between 50 and 100 people have been killed in the clashes, with bodies regularly being found dumped in the streets. In one shocking instance of body messaging, 5 bodies were left propped against a wall with sombreros on their heads and chests. The sombreros are believed to be a symbol linked to the Mayos faction, although the exact meaning remains unclear. This tactic of body messaging is used by both factions to send threats and warnings to their enemies. How does Culiacán feel about this? As the conflict between the Mayos and Chapitos intensifies, the residents of Culiacán find themselves trapped in a state of terror. Gunfights between the two factions often take place at night, leaving citizens to wake up to scenes of violence and death in the morning. In some cases, the gunmen have even stopped buses and warned passengers to turn back, saying there is carnage ahead. For the people of Culiacán, this is the worst violence they have seen in 15 years. Most schools are shut down, businesses are closing early, and the once vibrant nightlife of the city has come to a complete halt. Musicians who used to perform in bars and restaurants are now forced to busk in the streets to earn enough money for food. "We're here to get money for food because it's really tough," says one musician. Almost all of the gigs have been canceled. Nothing, not even a morsel. The conflict has left thousands of people out of work, and many are relying on government food packages to survive. People queue for hours just to get basic supplies, unsure of when or if life will return to normal. What impact it has made on families and children. The violence is taking a particularly heavy toll on children and families. Many residents have had to take extreme measures to protect their loved ones. A mother named Hilda, who lives with her 7-year-old son Santi, describes how the recent gun battles in their neighborhood have left them traumatized. "It was traumatic," she says. "The children were scared. My son was terrified when he heard the shootouts. He had to hide with his grandparents." Children like Santi are growing up in a world where gunfire, kidnappings, and cartel violence are daily occurrences. The psychological impact of living in constant fear is immeasurable, and many families are desperate for a way out. What are the actions taken by the military? In response to the escalating violence, the Mexican government has deployed over 3,000 soldiers to Culiacán. These troops are tasked with maintaining order, but their presence has done little to stem the tide of violence. When asked when the situation would return to normal, one military commander admitted, "It doesn't depend on us. It depends on the groups in conflict if they stop fighting and leave the population in peace." This statement highlights the grim reality of the situation. The Mexican government, despite its best efforts, has little control over the cartel violence that is tearing the city apart. The state is caught in a difficult position as it lacks the power to stop the conflict outright. For now, peace depends entirely on whether the warring factions decide to negotiate or continue their bloody struggle for dominance. What are the roots of this conflict? The power struggle between the Mayos and Chapitos is not just about territory or drug routes, it is also a generational conflict. The Chapitos represent a younger, more aggressive faction, eager to assert their control over the cartel's operations. El Mayo, on the other hand, is a veteran leader who has been involved in the drug trade for decades. His faction represents the old guard with deep ties to the cartel's original operations. This internal division has caused a split in the cartel, with each side amassing its own army of loyalists. The Mayos have long relied on their alliances with other powerful drug lords, while the Chapitos have expanded their influence through their father's legacy and their own violent tactics. The conflict is also fueled by the broader drug trade in Mexico. The Sinaloa Cartel remains one of the most powerful organizations in the country, and control over its operations is a prize worth fighting for. The violence in Culiacán is just one part of a larger battle for control of Mexico's drug trade. What are the impacts of a wider conflict? The war between the Mayos and Chapitos threatens to engulf the entire Sinaloa Cartel. While the fighting is currently concentrated in Culiacán, there are fears that it could spread to other parts of Mexico. The cartel has a presence in nearly every state, and if the conflict continues to escalate, it could have devastating consequences for the entire country. The Mexican government has a difficult task ahead. If the violence continues to spread, it could destabilize large parts of northern Mexico, leading to even more bloodshed and suffering. Some experts believe that the only way to resolve the conflict is through negotiation, but others argue that the government must take stronger action to dismantle the cartels once and for all. The civil war within the Sinaloa Cartel has turned Culiacán into a war zone, with the Mayos and Chapitos fighting for control of the cartel's operations. The violence has left a trail of death and destruction, and the people of Culiacán are living in fear. Schools are closed, businesses are shuttered, and families are struggling to survive in a city paralyzed by cartel violence. As long as the war continues, the people of Culiacán will remain caught in the crossfire. The future of the Sinaloa Cartel and Mexico's drug trade as a whole depends on the outcome of this brutal conflict. For now, the residents of northern Mexico can only hope for peace, even as the violence rages on.